Not going to lie to you. Tonight's slate for daily fantasy baseball is pretty gross. There aren't a lot of pitchers I can feel great about. In fact, there's no pitcher I feel great about for tonight. There are guys who I can talk myself into, but I never really want to talk myself into guys. So our quest for today is try to find pitchers with upside because nobody has a good floor. And the good thing for us, at least, is that although pitching is bad for us, it's bad for everyone else too, which means everyone else dealing with these same issues and we can still win money. So let's dive on in and try to identify how we want to play things on what is objectively a pretty gross slate. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Thursday's 5-game main slate with lock set for 7-10 for tonight. Now, as far as weather goes, there's no rain in the forecast, but I would note that New York City got dumped on yesterday, and there was a lot of flooding and stuff like that. They are currently scheduled to play the Mets versus the Marlins. I would expect that game to play, but I also would not be entirely shocked if that game were to get banged. So check back to make sure that game is still on. It is as of right now, and again, I'm expecting it to play, but just note that there is some potential shakiness there, despite the fact there is no weather in the forecast for today. There's also a lot of stuff that could change for tonight. We got a starting pitcher situation that's not yet known. We'll touch on that later on, but more incentive for you to swing back here at 4 p.m. Eastern time today. YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter on the FanDuel page is there to swing by and see how things have changed throughout the day. And I would note it's especially key because lineups do matter a lot. We can see value pop up that we didn't discuss here during the show for today. Yesterday, we talked about Gavin Sheets being good value. He had a double dong, although Bertha Mondesi was not known to be coming back for sure in the morning. Once it was known, he became a good play. So I would recommend, in terms of the hitters specifically, tuning in for the afternoon stream. 4 p.m., FanDuel, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter will be live there, taking your questions live on air. Also, make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Still some time right now to check out the Podcast of the Tour Championship, which we'll lock later on today. That is with myself, Brandon Gadula, breaking down our thoughts on a unique format for the Tour Championship. Tomorrow, NASCAR. We also have USC coming up, of course, as always. And NFL, next one, the first NFL podcast 1 week from today. Should be a blast. Looking forward to talking to you then. Make sure you hit subscribe. And also, if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Hey, football fans, the 2021 NFL season is just around the corner, and you still got time to fill out some best ball contest. Go to FanDuel.com, where you can enter any best ball draft that you want. Pick your league size, pick your entry size, and draft your team, set it, forget it, you're good to go, and compete for cash prizes. Of course, you have private leagues as well. Head on over to FanDuel today and start drafting. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. Pitching preview for this Thursday slate depends on who you ask. Right now, Sandy Alcantara is the highest salary pitcher on FanDuel at 10-5. He might not start. It might be Zach Thompson. I am assuming right now it is Zach Thompson. Thompson would be next up in the rotation, but now Trevor Rogers is coming back. Maybe they decide to have Thompson, take a seat for a bit. I don't know. Either way, we're going to assume here today Thompson is starting. I will talk about Alcantara and things to watch in case he does wind up being the guy. Shane McClanahan is 10-1. Tristan McKenzie is $8,800. Mike Miners, $85. Tuki Toussaint in Coors is $85. Then Eduardo Rodriguez is $8,200. And running through that list, you can tell there's a lot of risk. There are no safe spots, I don't think. Maybe Alcantara would be kind of safe if he were to start. But again, I don't know if he'll start. So if we assume that risk is there, we can shoot for upside. This is not like a cash game slate, in my opinion. This is more of a tournament slate. So if we're looking for upside, I think Eduardo Rodriguez might have the best upside of this group. So I will be in on him for tonight. Rodriguez is facing the Rays, and there is a good amount of power in that lineup, but not as much against lefties as versus righties. Their ISO goes down to 164 versus lefties, which is down about 40 points from where it's at against righties. Obviously, the Nelson Cruz acquisition does help them quite a bit in that regard, but they are definitely a team we should be more inclined to use lefties against than righties. They also do strike out. They have a 24% strikeout rate versus lefties, and that's why the discussion around Rodriguez's upside is fair. He is a good pitcher, even if he is hyper inconsistent. Rodriguez has had less movement on his fastball over his past 11 starts. He has a 29% strikeout rate in that time, which is the highest mark on the slate. He also has the second lowest hard hit rate allowed. The fly ball rate is 35%. So the peripherals for Rodriguez are very good. That has not always led to great results. He let up 5 runs to Texas, who is terrible against lefties. He had just 2 strikeouts last time out against Cleveland, also a bad team against lefties. So Rodriguez is inconsistent, and that also plays into the volatility discussion, but he can have a ceiling. He had 10 strikeouts against Detroit. He had 8 against Tampa, Toronto, the Yankees twice, and there are not many guys in the slate who can get you 8 strikeouts in a game. So I think Rodriguez is a fine play tonight, even with his concerns. So yeah, it is troubling that he has this inconsistency, can have bad starts against bad teams, but I think all things considered, Rodriguez is the number one guy, for me at least, for tonight. As far as the number 2, we're going to go with a matchup-based play here, which I don't like doing, and it's a guy I'm still pretty wary of in Carlos Carrasco. He has not gone longer than 78 pitches yet, but he has some decent underlying numbers, and he gets the Marlins tonight. That may be enough to make him viable on what is really a rough slate. The matchup here is pristine. The Marlins have an 82 WRC plus versus righties with just a 127 ISO, and that is a much softer matchup than Carrasco has had recently. His past 3 starts have come back-to-back outings versus the Dodgers and then the Giants. He still has a 24% strikeout rate despite facing those teams. The swinging strike rate is 12.7% across those 3 games. It was 14.1% against the Giants, and that game specifically to me was encouraging. The velocity for Carrasco was by a decent amount the best it's been all year. He threw just 78 pitches, but those 78 pitches got him through 7 innings. It's possible he could have a longer leash if, he's less efficient with his pitches. So we just can't know for sure. I think we can fully justify taking swipes at Carrasco here. It might not work, but that's also true for literally every pitcher on this slate. So, eat Arby's, embrace the volatility, embrace the darkness, embrace the void. I think Carrasco is a good play for tonight. He is $6,800. So you want to go nuts at Coors Field, lock in Carlos Carrasco, and hope he does okay. Again, it's risky for sure. For the final slot, you could go a lot of ways. We'll talk about Alcantara again and things to watch. We'll talk about Tristan McKenzie. We'll talk about Shane McClanahan. There are concerns around all those guys, though, outside of Alcantara, if he does go. But I just want to go with a guy who is like a decent all-around pitcher, goes deep in games, and is at home. That's Mike Minor. Minor is not a high strikeout guy, but neither are most pitchers on this slate. I think that he's firmly on the table as a result of the things he does do well. He's facing the Royals, or he's facing the Cleveland, I should say, which is not the best matchup by any means, but it's also definitely not the worst because Cleveland, they've gotten better. They've gotten guys like they got Harold Ramirez back last night. That's good for them versus lefties, but also still just a 91 WRC plus, a 159 ISO. They don't hit the ball in the air all that much. So I do still consider them a plus matchup. Obviously, Franmil Reyes, Jose Ramirez, they've got some dudes, but it's a pretty thin lineup overall. Minor is pretty solid. He's been using fewer changeups over his past 10 starts, and in that time, his skill interactive ERA is 4.47. He has a 20% strikeout rate and a 6% walk rate. Those are not world-beating numbers by any means. And, usually I'm more inclined to stack against those numbers and use this guy as a pitcher. But in Minor's defense, he has faced some tough teams. He faced Houston twice, then the Blue Jays, White Sox, and Red Sox all once. You don't expect great numbers against that string of teams. He did still manage to go 6 innings in 6 out of 10 games. He had 7 strikeouts 3 times. So Minor can score well. On a bigger slate, I would not touch Mike Minor. I would have no interest, literally zero interest. But I think that he's at least an option. I would also say you could consider one-offs against Minor, like Franmil Reyes, definitely in play for one-offs for today. Jose Ramirez, definitely in play for one-offs on this slate. I think that Minor's an option. I don't feel great about him, but I don't feel great about anybody here. So Minor to me would be number 3. And again, we'll talk about McKenzie, McClanahan, and Alcantara in things to watch. If Alcantara plays, we're not touching Mike Minor. But I don't think that'll be the case for today. Obviously, if pitchers are pretty thin, stacks should be better, and they are, especially because I think Coors Field, really fun for tonight. You look at the temperatures across today, it's in the 70s, the low 70s, almost everywhere. Coors Field is 79, but it's also Coors Field. So not only is the tied for the highest temperature, but it's also far and away the best park. So I want to stack up both sides here, and I can definitely do so based on the pitching salaries. And also, the salaries at Coors are they're too low. It's kind of like they're not at Coors. So just stack up Coors Field for sure. The Braves have lost some firepower recently. Obviously, no Ronald Acuna Jr., but also Ozzie Albies. That thing didn't look good. I would kind of be surprised if he plays tonight. But they're facing Chichi Gonzalez at Coors Field. So I think that they are the top stack for sure. Gonzalez is moving into the rotation once again in place of John Gray. Gonzalez has been in and out of the rotation recently. He got demoted after he returned from the COVID IL, but the velocity for Gonzalez had been declining even before he got COVID. He has been down even more in the 2 outings since he returned, and we've got 8 outings for Gonzalez with his velocity being down at least a bit, and his strikeout right there is 14%. He has a 5.16 skill interactive ERA, and those are numbers against which we can stack outside of Coors Field. You put him at Coors Field against a powerful team like the Braves, that's pretty rough. He has a 6.62 ERA there. It is a depleted team in the Braves, but they still have a lot of powerful hitters. So I feel confident in the Braves here, whether Albies plays or not. And that's the best thing about the Braves in terms of trying to stack them for DFS is they're deep. We can feel good about them pretty much no matter what they do with their lineup. Like their bench is really fun. Eddie Rosario might play. He went deep last night. He's usable at Coors Field. Same for Guillermo Heredia. Like they've got dudes deep on their bench who I'd be fine using for DFS. And we can get to these guys. We can also feel fine about the bottom of the order. Like Jock Peterson, I think he hit leadoff last night with Albies being out. Let's say Albies plays and Peterson bats 8th. I would still use him. I don't tend to use guys batting 8th in National League teams because they're in front of the pitcher. Does put a pretty big cap on their upside, but like with Jock, it's fine. So I would potentially make an exception here. I think that 1 through 8, they are very stackable. So to me, the Braves, a high quality stack for today, and to me, pretty clearly the number 1 stack. The Rockies, though, are number 2. I do have a strong preference for the Braves, but I do like the Rockies number 2. They're facing Touki Toussaint. He has been out of the rotation very briefly. He now is back in for tonight. And he's had some good flashes, but I'm not sure it's good enough to avoid stacking against him at what is far and away the best run-scoring environment on the slate. Toussaint has been throwing more splitters recently. If we look at the final 5 starts he made before that one bullpen appearance, he had a 4.69 skill interactive ERA, which is largely inflated due to an 11% walk rate. He was putting guys on base, and that's an issue when you're still having trouble suppressing hard contact. In that time, Toussaint had let up a 47% hard hit rate with a 41% fly ball rate. That led to some dingers. He led up 2 home runs to the Brewers and the Marlins, and those are not the best teams. The Marlins game was in Miami as well. So Toussaint can get strikeouts, and there are paths to this stack failing as a result of that. But it's so hard to bet against Coors on this specific slate. So I think it's wise to stack the Rockies here and be not as high on them on the Braves, but pretty close to it and just having a lot of both teams in this scenario. When you're stacking the Rockies, I think we need to be higher on Trevor Story than we've been throughout most of the year. He seemed like I don't know if he was hurt or whatever. He just didn't seem like he was himself this entire year. There wasn't as much power there, but over the past 3 weeks, Story's hard hit rate is up to 51%. It is 43% for the full year. He is striking out a bit more, but I'm okay with that trade-off if it comes with more power. So I think that Story is back to being a focal point within our Rocky stacks, which to me at least hadn't really been the case for a large portion of the year. But I do think that Story, what he's done recently is enough to bump him up in my mind and make him once again the shining star in our Rocky stacks. As far as the non-core stacks for today, this one again is under the assumption that Zach Thompson starts for the Marlins instead of Sandy Alcantara. We'll talk about the Thompson scenario now and the Alcantara situation in things to watch. The Mets, if they do phase Zach Thompson, I think would be a good stack for today. Thompson is someone I really did like when he first got called up, but he's been struggling a lot recently. Thompson first started to struggle back in early July, and he did make some adjustments. The first thing he did was cut back on his changeup. That didn't help. His most recent adjustment has been to throw more cutters, And that hasn't done the job either. In the 4 starts with that approach, Thompson's strikeout rate is 11%, which is the lowest number on this slate. He has a 5.76 skill interactive ERA. That is the highest number on this slate. And he's also letting up a lot of fly balls. He has let up a 44% fly ball rate. The one thing Thompson's done well is keep hard contact in check. That's likely why his results have largely still been good. He did, though, let up 4 earned runs to the Padres. He let up 5 runs with 3 earned to the Reds in Miami last time out. He has benefited from a lot of plus situations, pitching in Miami specifically, but also facing some good matchups. The Mets are not playing well right now. We just don't have many great offense to choose from on this slate. So I think that allows us to use them despite their very legitimate struggles. Now, one guy I do want to turn to here, and it's despite the fact I'm not going to need salary savings, is Jonathan VR. He's probably going to hit leadoff, if I had to guess, based on their more recent lineups. We know about the speed for VR, but he also has a 218 ISO versus righties. You can get that for $2,500, and he has a lot of positional versatility too, which I've enjoyed from a stacking perspective and from a one-off perspective. So we're not going to need the salary savings tonight, I don't think, but I still believe that VR is someone I'd be willing to use, potentially even some salary on the table, because I do like the upside that he possesses, given the steals and given the power he has shown. Let's move now to talking about things to watch and specifically focusing on Alcantara. If Alcantara were to start for the Marlins, he would become the top pitcher on this slate for me. He has started to lower his sinker usage, which is something we always love to see. Sinkers suck, so see ya sinkers. The strikeout rate in that 5-start sample with fewer sinkers is 28%. The fly ball rate is low still, despite fewer sinkers, so why use it if you can get ground balls without it? So if Alcantara starts, he is a top guy on the slate. If Thompson starts, I'd stack the Mets. Does depend a lot on the situation, so once again, would recommend swinging back by at 4 p.m. today if you can to check out the Q&A. I'm not opposed to stacking the Cubs here. They're facing Mitch Keller. Keller is really struggling with hard contact, and the Cubs at least have some individuals who can hit the ball hard. So Frank Schwindel, Rafael Ortega, Patrick Wisdom, Ian Happ, all those guys work, and I could see stacking those 4 guys specifically. So the Cubs, I think, more so for one-offs, but, I could see stacking those 4 guys together and hoping the bottom of the order does something to increase plate appearance projections for the top guys in the order for today. Finally, want to talk briefly on Shane McClanahan and Tristan McKenzie. For McClanahan, it's about the matchup. The reason I didn't have him in the pitching section, the Red Sox are a really good offense, and McClanahan's biggest flaw is letting up a lot of hard contact. The good thing for McClanahan, the reason I think you could still get to him, is that the Red Sox have been weakened due to all their COVID positive tests. So they've lost some specifically guys who are good against lefties, and Kike Hernandez and Xander Bogaerts. So maybe that's enough to be high on McClanahan. I'm still a bit worried because Schwarber's there, Renfro's there, Martinez is there, Rafael Devers can hit lefties, but you've got leeway to use McClanahan, especially on what is a pretty wild slate. As far as McKenzie, the reason I'm not there is pitch count. He's making his first start. Since he came off the IL, he did miss basically the minimum number of games, but it was a shoulder injury, and shoulder injuries are always troubling for me when it comes to pitchers. Maybe it was like a workload thing, and they wanted to put him on the shelf, keep him rested up in a season where they're probably not going to, be doing too much. So if you feel good about the pitch count, McKenzie is in play. I don't feel good about the pitch count, so that's why I'm lower on him. So McClanahan, to me, I don't know. I think that maybe I'm too low on him, but I'm just really wary of a guy who lets up that much hard contact facing a team that has JD Martinez, Hunter Renfroe, et cetera, Kyle Schwarber, and stuff like that. That's why I'm lower there. But again, Alcantara's a big one to watch for today. Let's finish up here with some dinger calls focusing exclusively on Coors Field because of the Coors Fieldiness of it. The boring one is Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman is a good baseball player. I know, breaking news, but he's at Coors Field facing a guy who doesn't get strikeouts and is letting up a lot of hard contact right now. So if there's no Albies, Freddie Freeman, the clear top guy. So the boring call is Freddie Freeman. The more fun one is on the Rockies side, and that's Elias Diaz. He's been hitting for a lot of power recently, and not exclusively at Coors Field. So Diaz, a catcher. People don't tend to use a lot of catchers on FanDuel. So maybe with Freeman being there, with CJ Cron being there, And the way that those things break out, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes a bit overlooked. So Elias Diaz, to me, a really fun option tonight at $2,700. That is all that we have here for today on the Solo Shot. Again, though, a lot still to potentially change throughout the day. So make sure you swing by 4 p.m. Eastern, FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages to take your questions and get you set for tonight's slate and talk about any things that may have changed since this morning. If you got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. We recorded our college football week 1 betting preview with Ben Stevens of SportsGrid yesterday. That is now up, talking about his favorite bets week number 1. Find that by searching for Covering the Spread. Also, make sure you subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck on what could be a pretty wild slate, but hey, again, it's rough for everyone, so we can still win some money. Let's do that now and get set for a fun weekend. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.